My name is Rebecca Schlafer-Miller. I teach fifth grade at a Title I school in Northern California, and this upcoming year, I believe, will be my 13th year as a teacher. I originally started off as a kinder teacher, not thinking I would ever teach upper grades, and then during the years of pink slips, found myself in upper grades and found myself never wanting to leave upper grade. Pink slip is where there's not enough jobs available or if there's a budget crisis within the district. And so what happens is they go through what they have the seniority list, which is the hiring date of from the person that was hired the most earliest to the person who was hired most recently. And they tend to go at the bottom of the list, whoever was hired just recently, those are the people that tend to get pink slipped. Also depends on, I guess, if you're more of a secondary teacher, if it's a department kind of a thing, then they look at departments as well. But if you're an elementary level, they just go by your hiring date. Pre-pandemic, I always felt that I like to work smarter, not harder. And so I was someone that liked to go into work an hour early so I could get all my copies done, emails, any last little bits of things that I want my students to have access to. And so I always started off my day early by, making copies, going over lessons, figuring out and reflecting if I need to reteach a lesson from the previous day. Being at a Title I school, um, I want to say the academic levels of my students is maybe different from someone who doesn't work at a Title I school. Our school is predominantly high minority, so 75% or higher of Latinos. I know in my classroom over the years alone, I had some kids reading at grade level, some kids reading above grade level, but I would say a good 50% were reading 1 to 2 grade levels below where I was actually teaching. And so a lot of times it's like really looking at, okay, what is it that they didn't get the day before? What strategies can I use? I'm someone that really loves group work and community building. And so finding that you don't have to learn in isolation, but that you can learn with fun and in group kind of settings. And I found that a lot of my students learned that way. Now, when the pandemic hit, so I'll kind of like use this year as an example. A lot of it was just going into an empty classroom by myself. My son was going through the same thing. So he was in the corner of my room doing his own Zoom classes while I was teaching virtually and just feeling very stationary, kind of like how we are right now, just in a box. And just figuring out ways that I could access my students, even though it was through a kind of a digital platform. And so this year I found that I was putting together a lot of materials for my kids, especially with math being very hard. And most kids aren't taught to take notes like we learn in high school. So I already had all the notes written out for them, like photocopied. And then the kids could highlight with me and kind of do extras on their materials for them. So I provided everything for them, from the photocopies to the notebooks, all the way down to the pencils and pens and highlighters. And so that's what this year kind of looked like, was just figuring out how can I make it equitable for kids and not stressful for them, because most of them didn't have access to a lot of the materials that they might have liked. And a lot of them were home alone while they were in school. So they didn't have anyone but me to kind of help them out. Depending on what state you're in, there's different qualifications that you have to go through aside from attending, a college, state college, or a university. So you first have to do your prerequisites and all of that. So that's usually done at a 4-year college. Now, kind of looking back on it, I would highly recommend, if people are trying to save money, do your gen ed stuff at a junior community college, save money on that way. And so then when you have to do more of your student teaching and more of your higher academic courses, then you can go into the state and university level. But before you graduate, you do have to pass some tests. So there's the CBEST test, and that one requires you, it's kind of like basic education. So that one's usually used for anyone who wants to become a substitute teacher, or if you're a teacher out of college who cannot find a placement, then you could sub just with that kind of qualification. And then you also have to take the RECA, but it's now called the Ed TPA. So it's changed since I've taken it. Now, what happens is you have to, during your student teaching placement, you have to film yourself producing a lesson live to students, obviously with parent release. So some kids can be on the camera, and then those that can't just aren't on it. And your professor has to see from opening to close of the different types of mediums that you provide during that lesson. And then obviously there's a write-up that goes with it as well. Most people have to do 2 in one kind of like thing before they get their credential. And then the final thing is, so let's say you've gone through all of that, you're hired. Now, in California, you have to go through something called the induction program. For many people, it feels redundant of your last year of college. It's similar to student teaching, with the exception of you're your own classroom teacher, but you do have a mentor teacher and you have to do some inquiries for 2 years. So for myself, I am a mentor teacher in the induction program. I've been a mentor for the last 7 years. And so it's just a matter of, in order for you to clear your credential with California, you have to do this 2-year program with the inquiries, with the support of your mentor. And then after that, your credential is cleared through the state of California. So there's a lot of little things that kind of go with it. I do know for those people that feel, I guess, bombarded with a lot of like tests, because tests can be intimidating. I know when I went through Sacramento State, all of our college courses for that semester was dependent on what part of the test we were taking. And so, for example, if we had to take the history test in like 3 months, then we only took history courses to prepare us for the test. And so that is like a big recommendation. Try to have things, I would say, organized versus all over, because the tests aren't always matched up to whatever courses you're taking. For me, I went straight from high school to 4-year state school. After that, I was hired and then pink slipped for 3 years, but kept getting rehired after that. I did do 1 year of substitute teaching just because there were no jobs available. And that was during the year of like 2008, 2009, when the whole economy was just debacled. So there's that. And then a few years ago, we were dealing with kind of a revolving door in administration at our site. And I was teacher in charge. Teacher in charge means that if an administrator is not available, that the best qualified teacher who's in leadership and is also the grade level lead can fill in for an administrator. Well, that was me, thinking it was going to be for a week kind of thing. And I left my class and I ended up being the assistant principal for 10 weeks straight. Found that something I never would have imagined myself loving, I ended up loving it. And I just completed my master's this last September in administration leadership. So one day, my goal is to be an administrator. But I will say, originally, before becoming a teacher, I actually enrolled as a forensic kind of criminal justice student and changed my mind the day of orientation to education. The biggest thing I want to like tell people who are in education is that you are always a student. You are always learning to grow and change your craft. Like something that might have worked 2 years ago might not work right now. I mean, for all of us who are veteran teachers, we had to really shape our mind around things and train ourselves to do things versus teachers who came straight out of the universities where they had access to a lot of these new strategies, especially with technology. And so just understanding that you are always a student and you are always trying to grow professionally. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Moats from Grand Forks, North Dakota, she was, I don't even know how to describe her as a person, but she just embodied of like who I wanted to be one day. And so when I was younger, I was like, I am going to be a teacher. And I always had that mindset. And then when I was in high school, I was, really into science. And I was just thinking, you know what? I want to go into criminal justice. I love the whole like idea of like the law and just helping people. But then somehow the day that orientation came, just, it just kind of slipped into my mind like, is this really what you want to do? Or do you really, you can still help people, but be in the form of education? And so that's what caused me to make that switch. And I absolutely love it. My big thing as a person, but as a teacher is I want to teach my kids beyond academics, but how to be a person in society. Because a lot of the kids, there are wonderful parents who are able to instill those values with their children. And then there's those who are the working class who want to, but are just not able to. And I want to be able to provide those supports so that these children are getting the same amount of education, not just, academics and curriculum, but character development, mental health, just being able to survive as a person in our interchanging society. So it depends on your school site. My school site is very unique within the district itself. So our site itself has about 1,000 students and there's about 40 teachers. But what's unique about my site is we have something called the dual immersion program. So we have every grade level has 2 to 3 teachers who teach in Spanish and in English. And then there's the other program, which is called Reach, and that's where I am. So I teach only in English. And depending on the grade levels, we do, before the pandemic, we did try to switch our kids so we can mix our kids and have kids be able to interact with different teachers, but also different students within their cohort bands. So at my site, I do work with a lot of people, but depending on the city you live in and the district you live in, you might just work with just maybe your grade level or your department, or maybe just your administrator, depending on how big your site is. Definitely. So number one, you have to be able to work with people and you have to be able to talk to people, whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, an ambivert. You have to be able to work with others. And teamwork is so important. Communication is important. So I actually was in retail and I worked retail all the way through my first year of college, first year of teaching, actually. And I worked at a retail site where we didn't just have people from like tourists statewide, we actually had tourists from all over. And so I used a lot of my Japanese skills to be able to talk to people from Japan who couldn't speak English. But getting people to understand that just because I'm selling something, that's not the point. It's to have a connection with your customer and have that trust so that they feel like, okay, you really want to help me. It's not you're really just trying to sell me this purse, sort of thing. And so being able to speak to different types of people, how to deal with people who might seem a more abrasive, or how to deal with people who kind of seem to be more closed off, and just making them feel comfortable. And that right there, just being able to speak to different types of people kind of carries over into education, where you have to talk to your colleagues, you have to talk to people at the district office, but also how do you deal with students who are all different, especially when you're in a classroom full of different types of learners and different types of kids. Some are more open and some are just very closed off, and you have to figure out how can you create that relationship with a student or a mentee so that they can trust you. Otherwise, if there's no trust, then nothing's going to happen. It's just going to be a wall. You have to be flexible and adaptable, and knowing that what you might have planned out in your lesson plan book might not happen. This golden lesson that you're so excited to teach might just not happen because you have some type of student kind of issue that you have to deal with, or a group of students didn't understand the lesson that you taught before. So moving forwards would only cause that group to fall further behind. And so just being able to adapt and be flexible to your situation, but also to be reflective of your craft. What is it that you're doing that the students are actually grasping onto? Or, I noticed that like no one understands what I'm saying. What is it that I'm saying or doing that they don't understand? And so I would just definitely say, like, be aware of your surroundings, but know that as teachers, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to tell students, well, I taught that wrong. But kids, they want that relationship with their teachers. And so for me, like if I mess up, I always go, my bad, sorry, oops, that was wrong. And so they can see that like teachers make mistakes too, because there's that stigma that a student thinks that my teacher is the expert of everything and they should never make a mistake. And the reality is we do, and they need to see that so that they learn that if they make a mistake, it's a lesson on what to learn from. And it's the same for us as teachers as well. You want to have some type of technology training. Um, and depending on, I guess, the budget of your school site. So for us at my school site and in my district, we heavily used our laptops that the district provided. We had to know how to use Zoom. Some people already knew how to use Zoom. Some people had to be taught how to use Zoom. Um, how to use a document camera. So that's where it mirrors the image of what you're teaching so that when you share your screen, the students can see. It depends on sites. So I know for us, we used a lot of Google Classroom. Primary used Seesaw, which is more of a primary version of Google Classroom. Some sites use School City or Schoolology, which is also very similar to Google Classroom. So depending on your district, they should be providing some type of professional development on technology. But I always would like to stress that before going to your administrator or before kind of emailing the technology department, really rely on your grade level team or your department. Those are the people that you work with the most, and those are the people that could probably help you quicker than trying to send a technology request or going to your administrator who might have 10 other things that's on their list and you're kind of right here on the list. So definitely just reach out to the people that you're really working with. So pre-pandemic for professional developments, we were able to. So some trainings were at the district, some trainings were in Sacramento, which is about an hour's drive. I also used to do something called AVID. So AVID is, teaching students organization, teaching students how to access curriculum, but also how to be like a great student. So we were actually supposed to travel to Southern California for that training, and then school shut down. And so things kind of dissipated. So everything right now, other than me driving to my school site, which for me, because I live locally, is like a 15-minute drive. For some people that I know that I work with personally, some of them had a 45-minute drive, depending if they wanted to teach on campus. But I think it just really depends on, you might commute depending on what site you get hired at. Um, Now with what it seems that it's a lot cheaper and easier to provide trainings like this, I think most people are kind of sticking to this kind of form because you don't have to pay for hotel or mileage or anything like that. I work in public, and I also work at Title One. So class sizes are obviously a lot larger compared to private, where they might have a smaller class size. Pay really depends on the district and the area as well. I know in private schools, they generally don't pay as much as public school, but also parent involvement is different depending on the demographics and also the area that your school is located in. I know for at our site, we've had some parents who worked behind the scenes, whether it's stapling, photocopying, donating, or working a festival. Or there's some parents that aren't able to help just because either childcare or they're working multiple jobs. So parent involvement really is different depending on what site you're at. I know at a teacher that I mentor, she's at a different school site and there is more parent involvement. And that's just because more of those parents are stay-at-home parents. And while one is working, one is at home. So they're able to be a little bit more involved in their child's education. It really depends on who you are as a person. You know, if you are someone who wants to budget, then obviously that's what you're going to do. And you might live more frugally. There's some people who might live a little bit more lavishly. And it also depends on if you're in a partnership or if it's just you. And so it really depends on the person itself. You know, before I was married, I was able to do, I would say, a little bit more things that I wanted to do because I didn't have to pay for childcare, didn't have to pay for extra food. It was just me. So if I wanted to go on a vacation, I could. Now, that we do budget, it's not that we can't go anywhere. It's just we choose not to go anywhere so that we could save up to go to like bigger places. Now, also depending on the site that you're at and the funding that's available at your school site also is dependent on materials. So basic school supplies. For us, we did receive some money from our school site to pay for basic, very basic materials for our students: pencils, pens, a highlighter. And then there's some teachers, like I know when I was growing up, the parents provided all the school supplies and that was their school supply. But for me, most of my students are not able to afford it. And so I do pay out of pocket. There are times that I can get reimbursed for it, but it is a tax write-off when you donate to your classroom. And so for me, I buy all of my students their materials at the beginning of the year so that every kid has the same color math notebook. Every kid has the same color writing notebook. Every kid has a pencil pouch. Every kid has a binder. And we do try to fundraise throughout the year if we're able to. But for me, I pay out of pocket. My husband's just kind of used to it now that, okay, my wife's going to spend probably about $400 for things. I do reach out and fundraise and have people who donate to me. But for me, I don't mind dishing out that kind of money for my students just because I want every kid to come to the first day of school without the stress of going, oh, that person has that and I don't, or I can't afford it. I want everyone to come in with a smile like, oh my gosh, like I have that on my desk too. And so please don't, I want to stress this because a lot of teachers feel like I can't afford that, or a teacher doing that makes me feel less adequate. And that's not the goal. If you can provide, great. If you can't, it's still okay. And you just have to learn to be flexible of what you can do for your kids, or reaching out to parents and asking them, hey, this is what we need, a material that we need for our class. Are you able to donate? And most of the time, most parents will not only donate for their own child, but for a few other kids in their classroom as well. So don't ever feel like you have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars within your own classroom. There are other ways of finding money and supplies. Donors Choose is a great platform where you can put in projects, whether it's from basic supplies, textbooks, library, technology items, flexible seating, and you just write kind of like a mini grant, tell them what you need, what it's for, tell them a little bit about your class, and people from all over the country donate. And I've been doing it for a few years. I think the most expensive project I put in was $700. And every project I've ever proposed has always been funded within 2 months. So that's a great resource to use. That, yes, I do. But I also did 12 months worth of work in 10 months. Teachers that go to work early, teachers that stay late after work, you're not getting paid. You're out of your contract. That's what you volunteer to do. And so a lot of it is your work. Yeah, I have the summers off, but I've worked tons of hours for free for my students and for myself, professionally. Another one is people think that when you're working in elementary school that it's playtime, or you're just teaching them kind of the basics. And the reality is each teacher is different, but I really stress on community building, character development. That to me is the most important before you teach them academics, because you can't, for me, I feel like it's very challenging to teach a kid to want to be at school if mentally they're distraught about something or they're dealing with some type of trauma. You have to make them feel like school is a safe place. And so for us, I feel like elementary, we are the foundation of building the house of a child's schooling before they go to secondary school, because some of the skills we're teaching them, they're going to need in junior high. So with what happened this last year and a half, that we were only working, that teachers were only working half time, or teachers didn't really care about kids. And the reality was that's not true. A lot of it, we felt like we were doing more work, having to connect with kids or having to help a kid with technology, not in their house. I don't know how many times I had to give tech support over Zoom and on the phone at the same time, just so a kid could access school because no one was home. Or, we weren't working half time. We had office hours to help kids in smaller groups, but also outside of the time we were teaching in office hours, we were planning for the next day, how to take something that's on paper and how to make it digital and equitable and understandable for kids. And so I think that was like the biggest stigma this year that we faced, was we were only working half time. In reality, we weren't. A lot of us, we're trying to figure out, how can we make school fun even though a kid is from afar? Or how can I support a kid who's not logging into class ever and they're falling further behind? We were doing a lot of behind the scene things that I think some people just weren't aware of that was happening. I've had kids in the past where they moved straight from Mexico to California, could not speak any English. And my favorite story is when I started off as a third grade teacher at my site, I had a girl that was like that. She really relied on peers in the class to translate to her in Spanish, and then they would translate back to me in English. And I ended up moving with my kids to fourth grade and in fifth grade. So she continued to be my student. And at fifth grade, she became my highest performing student. And then when she went to high school, she was top 10 in the high school. So the high school was huge. And she ended up getting a full ride scholarship to kind of study abroad in Europe. And, her family thanked me, because a lot of her English and her learning and the patience came from me. But I would definitely say building the relationships with my kids. For me, this year was the hardest because none of my old kids could come visit. They weren't allowed on campus. It was strictly whoever attended our elementary school could only visit. And so I don't know how many students I had to say, I'm sorry, you can't come see me. But, that was like the biggest thing, is the relationships that I've had where I have all my kids always come visit randomly. And that's my favorite, is when I don't know when they're visiting, but they always come to visit, and then they want to give little bits of nuggets to, my students. But my favorite, I would say, is watching when they come through the door, and all of them do this, and it's so cute, and it kind of gets me every time. They walk in the doorway and they stop, and it's almost like they're breathing in a memory, and they go, oh, I remember my desk was here. Oh, I remember when we did this here. I remember when you had this here. And so just watching their faces have these flashback memories always warms my heart. Sometimes it's challenging to get a hold of parents. And, some parents are just not able to because of language barriers, or maybe you are trying to contact them through an app on your phone, but they didn't download the app, or they changed their phone numbers. And that is the reality, that you just might not ever get a hold of that parent the entire school year. And I've had that. Your administrator has tried on your behalf to reach out for them, home visits, phone calls, and that too has not worked. But just know that just because things like that happens, never put it on the student, and just know that the student is there. The student is at school. And if you can't get a hold of the parent, then that's that moment where you get to be their parent for the day and celebrate any successes or support them in the challenges that they have. Some other negative things could be that you might go a whole week with having classroom management issues. And that's the reality. The newest teachers have them, the veteran teachers have them. And just knowing that it will pass. And sometimes you just got to reach out to your neighboring teacher, and figuring out like what strategies can you use to help this child or this group of kids out, because sometimes a lot of the underlying issues has nothing to do with you at all. It's home life or their own kind of internal struggles, and they just need someone to listen to them. And knowing that even though you have a million things to teach that day, you listening to that kid could really change the course of the next few weeks. And that would be more important than trying to teach a lesson and having it explode because a child or a group of kids are just kind of giving you a hard time. So I would say the negative part and positive part is you never know what kind of day you're going to have until you're in that day. There are some systemic issues in education that you as a teacher cannot control, whether it's district level or state level, whether it's equity or whether it's funding for curriculum. There are just there are just some things that you can't control, and know that you're not alone, that other people and other teachers are experiencing the same types of things, and you just figure out creative ways to work around it. um, like I said, education is, in a way, I would say the pandemic has really shown the field of education how we need to be flexible more so. Things happen and we have to figure out how can we make education accessible when there are roadblocks in our way. And I just think that this pandemic has really shown, not just to us, what I call in the trenches, but the commanding officers, those that are at the higher ups that aren't in the trenches with us, they have to figure out kind of ways on how to support us down below as well. And so I just think there's a lot of moving parts, and hopefully that the next few years kind of shows that we need to kind of shift the way we look at education. I mean, you see it in the news right now with the whole critical race theory and all these things that are kind of happening in society, and it's just things we have to look at and be okay in looking at and having those hard discussions. When I would say my second year teaching at a Title I school, I remember going to a veteran teacher. He was a former teacher, then he was an administrator, and then he went back to teaching. And I just remember going like, I have a group of kids that are always in small group with me, and they're performing below grade level, and I need to support them in this, but they also need support in this. And I just feel like they're always behind, like always behind. Like, how am I going to support them? And he just said, Becky, it's okay. There are some skills that spiral to the next grade. So if they can just get little bits of it with you, they'll be exposed to it again the following year. And so that was like a big one where I was like, oh, okay. Because, you put that pressure on, like, oh my God, like they're really struggling. I would say another one is learning to say no. And learning to say no does not make you a bad person. I remember early on in my education career, I said, anytime anyone asks me, think, sure, yes, yes. Oh, I'll do that. Yes, totally. I'll help you out. And then you kind of realize like, oh my gosh, I have this to do and I have to go do this and this and this. And then you start to go, why? Why? And so just knowing that it's okay to say no. No one is going to judge you for it, because they're going to realize that you have a lot of other things on your plate. And if you express it in a professional and positive way, like, I'm sorry, I can't do it right now. Maybe I can help you later on, or I'm doing all these other things. There's just no way. I'm sorry, I'm not able to. Maybe you can find someone else. People will be understanding. And I think that's the hardest thing. A lot of teachers that I've mentored in the past, they would be at work until 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, what? I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, I was like, I've never stayed at work that late ever. And how are you have to find that fine balance between professional and personal, your personal health, whether you have a family or it's just you, like you have to find that balance. And it's okay to say no, because if you continue to say yes, then your kind of mental state kind of crushes and things kind of start to unravel later on when you least expect them to. Depends on you. We have people that work only their contract hours. So, depending on when your school day contract starts. So, like for me, my contract starts at 8:10 and technically ends, well, before the pandemic, my contract ended at 3:30. But then there are some moments where you do have to work later, whether you have to go to an IEP for a student or if you have some type of staff meeting. So for me, I did go before contract hours. I always went to work at 7 so I could get anything done before 8, because I always found that around 8 o'clock, that's when people start calling my classroom, sending me emails, like asking me questions. And then, all those other things don't get done. I will say it does make it easier now that my son attends my school, so that I can see him a little bit in the morning and kind of hang out with him before he does things, because I did feel like I never really got to see him until his after school activities. And by then I'm like, like in mom mode, like, oh my God, like I gotta make dinner. I gotta take you here. I gotta go do this. And just feeling frazzled a lot. And so, like I said, just kind of, if you're with a partner, just figuring out, okay, you take so-and-so to practice today, or you eat breakfast. A lot of times for me, my son and I spent a lot of our time together just driving, whether it was to school, home from school. And that's kind of when we had a lot of our conversations. And so I definitely would say try to find that family time. For us, quarantine in the beginning really supported with that. Like I was able to, when I was teaching from home, I was able to see my kids more. I could kind of watch my kids grow in front of me, and like some of the things that they would ask me. And then when I went back to work, this year I went back to school because it was just easier for me to access all my materials there. So that's why I had my son come with me. But then there were moments where, quarantine really, really made you realize you were stuck with the same people over and over. And so you kind of have your moments. But I know in our house, every Friday night is family night. So whether we watch something that they want to watch on TV or a movie, or for us, I know I want to say last Friday, we decided not to have any TV on, no movies, nothing. And we just had books. And, obviously I had to read to my daughter because she's going to kindergarten, so she doesn't know how to read yet. So there's moments like that, but just, you have to find that balance for yourself and for your family, because believe it or not, as a mom, your kids notice. Your kids notice when you're in work mode and when you're in mom mode. And so it was really eye-opening for my son. He's like, oh, you're always on the computer doing work. And I just, I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that. And so you have to figure out what's going to work best for your family, and just know that there's not one perfect way. There's no perfect ways. It's kind of like throwing a fishing line in the water and trying to figure out, okay, maybe this one will work. And so just knowing that, give yourself grace. It takes practice. I would start off with reaching out to an administrator of a school site and saying, hey, I would love to do an observation of a teacher or of a classroom. I'm getting ready. I'm thinking about becoming a teacher or someone in the field of education. Would it be possible for me to do a tour or a sit-in? I would start there. I would even research, maybe before that, research the types of schools that are in your area. What type of a teacher do you want to be? Do you want to work for a private school? Do you want to work for a charter school? Do you want to work with older kids, younger kids? Because you definitely have to have patience for whatever groups of students you're working with, but you have to decide, do you want to help people who don't know how to do something at first? And I would say like that's an area to explore as well. Maybe even look at thinking of, if you were to get an education, what is it that you want to do? I know I have some friends that are in special education. I have some friends that are mental health clinicians. They love helping kids, but they just don't want to do it in like a curriculum form kind of way. And so definitely do your research. But like I said, see if you can get a tour, because that'll kind of give you an idea of if that's meant for you. Even research colleges, of the types of course requirements that are required to be an educator, because for some people, it might be overwhelming. There's no perfect model version of what a teacher is. Each person is different, and the skill sets that you bring to the table could definitely change a young person's life. Figuring out your path, right, is first have to figure out what is it that you love to do, and seeing if some of those things that you love to do fit a type of career. But also knowing that you could be someone who is in their 40s and maybe you were in a different job field, that it's okay to switch, long as you're willing, to put in the work, obviously. But knowing that your pathway for your career never ends. Some people become teachers and end up leaving. Some people become nutritionists and end up leaving. And just knowing that it's okay, because as a person, you're always changing. And the things that you were originally thinking or had set in your mind as a goal might shift later on depending on what happens in your life. And so knowing that, just kind of explore areas of like, what is it that you like to do? I mean, similar with me, like with administration, like never thinking I would ever in a million years go down that pathway, let alone going back to school 10 years, after going to college, and knowing that it's okay. You'll be fine. It just takes patience.